If Tim Hortons is part of your morning routine, you may have to shell out more money for your coffee. In a statement to City News, the coffee chain says it's raising the price of coffee by an average of 3 cents per cup and calls it the first increase in 3 years. Tim Hortons describes the raise as more than reasonable, saying it's significantly below inflation, which sits at 1.9% year to year in August. Tim Hortons also put the blame on coffee beans becoming more expensive, saying the price has more than doubled in the same 3 years.
Tim Hortons just reported its worst quarterly performance in years, and this isn't just another bad quarter. This is Canada's most iconic brand facing a perfect storm of economic pressures, collapsing consumer confidence, intensifying competition, and financial headwinds that are shaking the entire quick-service restaurant industry. Restaurant Brands International, Tim Hortons' parent company, missed earnings estimates in Q1 2025 as same-store sales at Tim Hortons fell for the first time in years. And this is happening while the brand that once commanded 75% market share in Canada is watching competitors chip away at its dominance piece by piece. This is happening right now, May 2025. And the implications go far beyond one coffee chain. Tim Hortons employs tens of thousands of Canadians. It's woven into the fabric of Canadian identity, and it's struggling like never before. I'm going to break down exactly what's happening here. The financial numbers, the competitive threats, the consumer behavior shifts. Because this isn't just about coffee sales. This is about whether Canada's most beloved brand can survive the economic and competitive pressures of 2025. But first, if you want to understand what's really happening in Canada's business landscape without the corporate spin, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Hit that subscribe button right now. Your subscription helps us keep doing this kind of investigative reporting. All right, let's get into the numbers. May 8, 2025. Restaurant Brands International reported Q1 2025 earnings. Tim Hortons, which accounts for more than 40% of RBI's total quarterly revenue, reported a 0.1% decline in overall comparable sales, down from 6.9% growth in the previous year. Let me be clear about what that means. Tim Hortons went from nearly 7% growth to essentially flat sales. That's not a slowdown, that's a collapse in momentum. Tim Hortons segment revenues fell to $903 million from $939 million year over year, a $36 million decline. The company blamed a $50 million unfavorable foreign exchange impact, but even accounting for that, the underlying trend is concerning. RBI CEO Josh Kobza admitted on the earnings call, "We did see a little bit of a dip in consumer confidence if you look at the Canadian Consumer Confidence Index. Through the first few months of 2025, we've been navigating a highly dynamic macro backdrop, one that's evolving differently across each of our key markets." Translation: Canadian consumers are pulling back, they're spending less, and Tim Hortons is feeling it. Restaurant Brands' net income dropped to $223 million from $328 million. That's a 32% decline. Income from operations fell to $435 million from $544 million. Diluted earnings per share dropped from 0.72 to 0.49. These aren't minor dips. This is a company in significant financial distress. Analysts had expected adjusted earnings of 0.78 per share. RBI delivered 0.75. They missed estimates. And Tim Hortons was a major driver of that miss. Same-store sales at Tim Hortons fell 0.1%, missing street account estimates of 1.4% growth. When you miss estimates by that margin, it signals something is fundamentally broken. Now let's talk about why this is happening, because understanding the causes matters. First, consumer confidence is collapsing. Canadians are worried about their economic future. Mortgage renewals are hitting households with hundreds of dollars in additional monthly payments. Unemployment is rising. Per capita GDP has been declining for 6 consecutive quarters. When Canadians feel economically squeezed, discretionary spending gets cut first. And yes, Tim Hortons coffee is discretionary spending. People brew at home instead. They skip the daily double-double. They choose cheaper alternatives. Second, competition is intensifying like never before. Tim Hortons once held 75% market share in Canada. That was 2014. Now, McDonald's and Starbucks have been chipping away at that dominance for years. A recent survey showed Tim Hortons still leads with 51% of Canadian coffee drinkers, but Starbucks captured 24% and McDonald's McCafe grabbed 14%. That's 38% of the market that Tim Hortons used to own almost entirely. McDonald's has been particularly aggressive. They've run promotions offering $1 coffee for weeks at a time. They've introduced free coffee after 7 purchases. They're undercutting Tim Hortons on price while matching quality. Starbucks has established strong footholds in urban centers, especially in Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, and Toronto. They're targeting younger demographics with specialty drinks and premium branding. They're convincing customers to pay more for perceived better quality. Third, Tim Hortons is caught in a pricing trap. They position themselves as the affordable option, priced significantly below Starbucks. A medium coffee at Tim Hortons is $1.76. At Starbucks, it's $2.65. That 50% price difference is Tim Hortons' competitive advantage. But here's the problem. When input costs rise, and they are rising, Tim Hortons can't easily pass those costs to customers. They're the value brand. If they raise prices too much, they lose their positioning. But if they don't raise prices, margins get crushed. CFO Sami Siddiqui warned on the earnings call about tariff impacts. Based on what we know today, if our efforts pan out, we will see a cost of goods sold impact of around 100 basis points or less. 100 basis points on cost of goods sold is significant when you're operating on quick service restaurant margins. That's profit getting squeezed from rising costs that can't be fully passed through. Fourth, consumer preferences are shifting. Younger consumers want healthier options, specialty drinks, plant-based meals. They want sustainability. They want transparency about sourcing. Tim Hortons has been slow to adapt. Their menu innovations, like the Ryan Reynolds breakfast boxes launched in May 2025, are attempts to stay relevant, but they're playing catch-up to competitors who've been evolving for years. Critics note Tim Hortons hasn't caught up on clean labels, organic ingredients, or lower sugar content. They've received backlash for disposable cups and lack of sustainable packaging. These perception issues matter to Gen Z and millennial consumers who are increasingly influential. Fifth, Tim Hortons is heavily dependent on Canada. The company relies on the Canadian market despite international expansion attempts. This concentration puts them at risk when the Canadian economy struggles, and the Canadian economy is struggling. Fitch Ratings maintains a deteriorating outlook for 2026. TD Bank forecasts recession in 2025. Bank of Canada stress tests show potential for 5% GDP contraction. When your primary market is heading into potential recession and 40% of your parent company's revenue comes from that one market, you're exposed. Now let's talk about what's happening on the ground. Because the financial numbers tell only part of the story. Individual Tim Hortons locations are struggling. In Thunder Bay, one franchise closed its dining room entirely due to safety concerns and declining traffic. In Okotoks, Alberta, a location shut down completely with furnishings dumped and signs removed. These aren't corporate decisions. These are individual franchisees giving up because locations aren't profitable anymore. And here's what most people don't understand. Tim Hortons operates primarily through franchises. The company owns only a small number of company-operated restaurants, mainly in Ontario for training purposes. Almost everything is franchised. That means when sales decline, franchisees feel the pain first. They're paying rent, labor costs, supply costs. If traffic drops even 10-15%, many locations go from profitable to break-even or loss-making. Franchisees can't sustain losses indefinitely. They close locations, they cut hours, they reduce staff, and that creates a negative spiral. Worse service leads to fewer customers, leads to worse financial performance. Now let's talk about the competitive dynamics, because this is where Tim Hortons' situation gets really concerning. McDonald's has become a serious threat through McCafe. In 2025, McDonald's rolled out beverage-led concepts into hundreds of restaurants, driving record sales of cold brews and flavored drinks. With global footprint and value pricing, McDonald's directly competes with Tim Hortons in convenience and price. Think about that. McDonald's already has the real estate. They already have the drive-thrus. They already have the breakfast traffic. All they needed was competitive coffee. And now they have it. Starbucks continues evolving. They're not competing on price. They're competing on experience, quality perception, and brand cachet. And in urban centers where affluent consumers concentrate, Starbucks is winning. Local independent cafes are also taking share. They offer authentic, personalized experiences that corporate chains can't replicate. They're small individually, but collectively they're death by 1,000 cuts. And here's the kicker. At-home coffee systems are exploding. Nespresso, Keurig, and other brands dominate at-home brewing. When consumers tighten budgets, making coffee at home is an easy cut. A $30 bag of beans makes 50+ cups. That's $0.60 per cup versus $1.76 at Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons is being squeezed from above by Starbucks, from below by McDonald's, from the sides by independents, and from within by at-home systems. That's a nightmare competitive environment. Now let's talk about what Tim Hortons is trying to do, because they're not sitting idle. They launched breakfast boxes with Ryan Reynolds in May 2025. CEO Kabza said it's doing great. They're trying celebrity partnerships to generate buzz. They're expanding cold brew and iced drink offerings. Cold drinks saw 6% sales growth in 2024, and they're doubling down on that category. They're investing in digital. Digital sales now account for 36% of total sales. They're pushing mobile ordering, app-based rewards, delivery partnerships. They're trying menu innovations, plant-based options, more lunch and dinner items, expanded food offerings beyond traditional coffee and donuts. But here's the problem. All of these are reactive, not proactive. Tim Hortons is responding to competitors rather than leading. And when you're playing catch-up in a mature market with declining consumer confidence, it's very hard to reverse momentum. CEO Kabza tried to sound optimistic on the earnings call. We're feeling really good about the Tim's business. We're confident we'll deliver at least 8% organic adjusted operating income growth in 2025. But that confidence feels hollow when same-store sales are declining, traffic is down, and consumers are pulling back spending. Here's the bottom line. Tim Hortons reported 0.1% decline in comparable sales in Q1 2025, down from 6.9% growth the previous year. Parent company RBI net income dropped 32%. They missed analyst earnings estimates. Consumer confidence is collapsing across Canada. Competition from McDonald's and Starbucks is intensifying. Market share has eroded from 75% to approximately 51%. Individual franchise locations are closing. Tariffs threaten to add 100 basis points to cost of goods sold. Canadian economy heading toward potential recession. This isn't a temporary blip. This is structural pressure on Canada's most iconic brand during an economic downturn. Tim Hortons faces challenges from every direction: financial, competitive, economic, and consumer behavior. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we're going to be tracking Tim Hortons' performance quarter by quarter. We're going to analyze every strategic move, every menu innovation, every market share report, every financial result, because this is the kind of story that matters to every Canadian. Tim Hortons employs tens of thousands of people. It's part of Canadian identity, and watching it struggle is watching a piece of Canada struggle. The question isn't whether Tim Hortons will disappear, it won't. The question is whether it can adapt fast enough to survive the perfect storm of 2025. And right now, the answer is unclear. This story is far from over. Stay tuned.